I've always been drawn to the unknown. There's something about unsolved mysteries that gets under your skin, keeps you awake at night, gnawing at your thoughts long after you've tried to forget. But these were different. They felt connected. It started innocently enough. A few late nights spent combing through old articles, police reports, and dusty archives. The first case was the disappearance of a child from a small town, the kind of story that haunts you with its simplicity. A kid vanishes without a trace, and all that's left behind are questions that no one can answer. The second was much darker, the brutal, unsolved murder of an entire family in their own home, found in ways that made seasoned detectives sick. As I dug deeper, the similarities became impossible to ignore. The dates were years apart, the locations miles away from each other, but the patterns, they were there. Strange symbols scrawled on walls, whispers of a figure seen lurking in the background, fleeting glimpses that everyone dismissed as the product of trauma or overactive imaginations. But what if they weren't? I began to notice something no one else had. Details that tied the two cases together like a twisted thread. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something darker lurking beneath the surface, something that had gone unnoticed for decades. It wasn't just a hunch, it was a pull, a magnetic force that wouldn't let me stop. And the more I followed the trail, the closer I felt to something terrifying. Something that didn't want to be found. The deeper I went, the more the lines blurred. What started as an innocent curiosity quickly spiraled into something darker, something that consumed every waking moment. It wasn't just a coincidence, there was something connecting these tragedies, something no one else wanted to see. Late one night, hunched over my desk, I found it, the first real link. It was buried in an old police report, a detail so small it had been overlooked by everyone else. The same strange symbol, carved into a tree near the site where the child had vanished, was also found on the wall of the murdered family's home. I felt a chill run down my spine. It couldn't be just a coincidence. Then there were the sightings, unexplained, fleeting glimpses of a figure lurking in the shadows, always just out of reach. Witnesses had described it differently, a tall man in a dark coat, a shadow with glowing eyes, a presence that made the air turn cold. But the fear in their voices was always the same. They spoke in hushed tones, as if saying too much would summon something they dared not face. And then I found the whispers, rumors of a curse, one that spanned generations. The curse was said to be tied to the land itself, a darkness that fed on the innocent, growing stronger with each victim it claimed. The families in both cases had lived within miles of each other, separated by decades but connected by something far older and far more sinister. It wasn't long before my research became an obsession. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My thoughts were consumed by the need to understand, to uncover whatever it was that had been hiding in the shadows for so long. I felt an inexplicable pull towards the locations where the events had taken place, as if something was calling me, daring me to uncover the truth. And with each step closer, the terror grew. I found the journal in the attic of an old, abandoned house. The place had been left untouched for years, dust thick on every surface, the air heavy with the scent of decay. It was hidden in a chest, beneath layers of forgotten belongings, as if someone had wanted it to remain buried. But I had found it. And now, there was no turning back. The first few pages seemed innocent enough, notes about the cases, interviews with witnesses. But as I delved deeper, the writing grew more frantic, more desperate. The detective, long dead and forgotten, had uncovered something horrifying, something no one else had dared to acknowledge. The journal spoke of things I didn't want to believe, curses, rituals, things that defy logic. He had discovered that the symbol found at both crime scenes was part of an ancient ritual, one meant to summon an entity that fed on fear and pain. The same entity, he believed, was responsible for both the disappearance and the murders. His words were filled with fear, as if he knew he was getting too close to something that wanted to stay hidden. As I read on, a sense of dread washed over me. The detective had tried to stop it, but he failed. He wrote about seeing things, shadows that moved on their own, hearing voices that shouldn't exist. And then, the entries just stopped. No conclusion, no explanation. Just silence, as if the darkness had finally claimed him. I slammed the journal shut, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the truth staring me in the face. This wasn't just some urban legend, some ghost story passed down to scare kids. This was real. And now, it was my burden to bear. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every rustle of the wind made my skin crawl. I could feel eyes on me, watching, waiting. And then, I heard it, a whisper, faint but unmistakable. It was my name, spoken in a voice that wasn't my own. I bolted upright, sweat pouring down my face, but there was no one there. Just the darkness, closing in around me. And then I saw it, a figure, just out of the corner of my eye, standing in the doorway. Tall, dark, and utterly still. My breath caught in my throat, my body frozen with fear. When I finally dared to look directly at it, it was gone, leaving only the suffocating silence in its wake. But the worst part was the realization that I wasn't safe. Not in my home, not anywhere. The entity I had read about, the one that had haunted the detective, was now haunting me. It was only a matter of time before it made its move. I could feel it tightening its grip on my mind, like a dark cloud slowly suffocating the light. The entity wasn't just a ghost, a lingering spirit from another world. It was something far worse. It was ancient, malevolent, and it had set its sights on me. At first, it was just small things, a shadow darting across the room, whispers in the night that I could almost dismiss as the wind. But then the vision started. I would see flashes of the missing child, hear the screams of the murdered family, their bloodied faces twisted in terror. They were everywhere I turned, their pain seeping into my soul, erasing the line between reality and nightmare. I knew what was happening. The journal had warned me, the detective's final, desperate words etched into my brain. I had become the latest target, the next chapter in this cursed story. And no matter what I did, I couldn't escape it. I tried to destroy the journal, to sever the connection, but it was no use. The pages wouldn't burn, the ink wouldn't fade. The more I fought, the stronger it became, feeding off my fear, my desperation. It wanted me to suffer, to lose my grip on reality, just like it had done to the others. Sleep became impossible. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, urging me to do things I didn't want to think about. And the figure, it was always there, just out of sight, watching, waiting for me to break. I'm not just a researcher anymore, I thought, as the madness took hold. I'm part of the story now. I tried to run, to escape the house, but the entity followed me. I could feel its presence, lurking in every shadow, whispering in my ear. It was inescapable, relentless, pushing me closer and closer to the edge. The nights blurred into days, each one more torturous than the last. I couldn't tell what was real anymore, couldn't trust my own mind. The entity wanted me broken, just like the others before me. And deep down, I knew that I was losing. The darkness was winning, dragging me into a place where no light could reach. I was trapped in its story, a story that had no end, only suffering, madness, and the cold, unrelenting grip of terror. I could barely hold the pen steady as I scribbled the last words into my journal, my hands trembling with fear. The truth was staring back at me, undeniable and horrifying. This entity wasn't just a ghost or a curse, it was something far older, far more sinister. It had been feeding on our fear for centuries, using each unsolved case to grow stronger, to spread its darkness like a disease. It wasn't bound to one place or one time. The child's disappearance, the family's murder, they were just the most recent victims in a long, unbroken chain of terror. And now, I was next. I could feel it inside me, twisting my thoughts, making me doubt what was real and what was nightmare. The figure that had haunted me for weeks was no longer just a shadow in the corner of my eye. It was a part of me, a dark presence that whispered in my mind, promising that the terror would never end. "They'll never find me," I wrote, the words scratching across the page in jagged lines. Just like they never found them. The story never ends, it only begins again, with someone new. I could see my reflection in the mirror, but it wasn't me looking back. The eyes were too dark, too cold, filled with a hunger that wasn't my own. I knew, deep down, that I was lost, that there was no escaping the fate that awaited me. The house was silent, but I could hear the voices, the cries of the missing child, the screams of the murdered family, all echoing in my head, growing louder with each passing moment. The darkness had taken me, just as it had taken them, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. And now, I'm the one in the shadows, I wrote, feeling the last vestiges of my sanity slip away. Waiting. The journal fell from my hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud, but I didn't care. The darkness was all-consuming now, wrapping around me like a shroud. I was no longer afraid, no longer fighting. I was a part of it, just as it was a part of me. And so the story would continue, its next chapter already written in blood and fear, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble upon it. The cycle would never end, only begin again, as it always had, feeding the darkness, perpetuating the horror. Because in the end, that's all there is, darkness, shadows, and the inescapable grip of terror.